You're listening to a Rock Candy podcast.
You are now entering Magnified Studios. Welcome.
Coming to you from Magnified Studios, Magnified Pod presents It's Hard to Find a Podcast, covering your favorite indie bands from the 90s Christian alternative scene. Put your tape decks on record. I'm Andrew.
I'm John.
And this is our podcast, and this is season 4 of Magnified Pod.
That's right.
I cannot even believe it a little bit.
We did it.
We did it, Joe.
We did it, Andrew. MagPod season 4 life.
Yes, there it is. This is going to be a very different season because for the past almost 4 years, we've been covering punk bands and ska bands, and now we are taking a very different turn, covering indie bands, covering some weird stuff, some slower stuff, some bleepy bloopy stuff,
some old sad bastard music, my style.
Sad dad music is kind of
hell yeah.
Yeah, we have varying experiences with a lot of the bands that we've covered throughout the years. This is going to be far more of a John season. Whereas season 3 was sort of more of a heavy me season in that that I had a lot more personal connections with a lot of those artists that we covered the skate punk stuff in season 3.
Yeah. The first 2 seasons for us were, these 2 bands we were very passionate about and enjoyable to go back and listen to stuff maybe we hadn't in a while, but they were relatively, cemented in our brains, those couple bands. Season 3 for me, the fun was like mainly discovering a lot of stuff I didn't know. This time around, an interesting sort of like middle ground maybe, where we're starting off with a band I know better than any band we've talked about on this pod. Pedro the Lion, Dave Bazan, I've often referenced as my number one dude on the show. So very, very familiar with the discography of him, which we'll be starting off the season with. But there are other bands again that, like, some of them I know really well, we'll be talking about. Some of them will be kind of newer for both of us. So I think we'll have some of the fun of discovering new stuff, and some of the fun of diving back into at least a couple bands I know really well. So
yes. And this season, having anticipated that the bummers will be experiencing will be more of a like depression vibe and not so much like lyrics about stuff that we're just like, oof, that does not hold up.
Yeah, we the box is buried at the bottom of the ocean. We're not opening it up again. The closest we'll get to that probably all season will be on the Patreon today.
Sure.
When we cover the whole EP, Pedro's first EP, when he was like still pretty firmly in the evangelical world, if poking at some of those boundaries. But the most sort of like theological bummers are probably just going to be on the Patreon this week. And after these first couple weeks of early Pedro, I think, at least for Bazan stuff, it'll take quite a turn away from anything we might bump on in that way. So
I know, and that's kind of, this is going to be sort of like probably that one episode that we will kind of have those kinds of conversations. But as you said, otherwise the box we sealed up last season, and now it's a funeral. Now it's at the bottom of the sea with the sunken ships.
That's right.
Just hanging out with Dave at the bottom of the sea, I guess.
Some mermaids. You're dodging the draft. You go down to the bottom of the sea. There's the box.
There it is.
Yes, extremely pumped to talk Dave and to talk Pedro. We should say, we're still kind of nailing down exactly all the bands and in what order we'll be doing. But we have a pretty good sense of most of them. And I've already sort of talked to folks about what we plan to cover this season. And it's interesting because some folks have been more in the, punk ska vein. And so we're like, oh, interesting, indie. Other folks are like, I sat out some of season 3 because I didn't know the bands as well, but Pedro's more my speed. So I think we'll probably get some new folks. We'll get some folks who maybe this isn't their like first choice of genre for us.
Right.
But hopefully, we're still doing the same kind of thing that folks enjoy in this community with diving into these old records and the scene and using it as a, launching off place to talk about culture, religion, and politics. And I think that we'll still explore some interesting places here. There have been there's been some contention, I would say, with like what our plan is right now among a couple of people I've talked to in terms of we're only planning to cover the Pedro specifically discography here and kind of staying away from Bazan solo records and headphones and other side projects. And, that hurts me in part because I love that stuff so much, but we can't cover everything.
No.
And, the idea is to kind of cover bands that at least began with and are still connected in some way to the alternative Christian music scene of the 90s and beyond that we're usually part of. And Bazan is just so far astray from that by the time he goes solo. But Curse Your Branches is so good. We might have to do a Patreon on that one. So
okay.
Anyway,
we are also, this is our podcast. We can do whatever we want.
That's right.
If we want to do a Patreon of Curse Your Branches, we can. But the point stands that the reason that we wanted to sort of, at least with the main episodes, stick with just Pedro is, to your point, like the whole EP was Tooth and Nail release, So, and we've spent so many hours talking about Tooth and Nail bands. And so, but yeah, by the time he was starting to do the solo stuff, he was pretty much done with the evangelical world. And I would love to talk about that because there's so much that I can say that we are going to talk about when we get into the records, especially once we get to Control and records after that I'm just like, oh God, I don't want to get too much into my takes, but I wish that I wish someone sat me down in my college years and was like, please listen to this.
I feel like I failed you, man.
Like this is, especially listening to some of the songs on this record and these first few albums, I'm like, he's going through the same shit that I was going through.
Yeah.
And but we'll get there. But I feel like we should maybe just use this time as we're talking about this to kind of, for those of you who are new to the podcast, new to Magnified Pod, you just saw Pedro and you're like, oh, I love Pedro. Cool. There's 2 white guys in their late 30s giving their hot takes on indie music. This is gotta be
deconstructed, you say?
Deconstruction, I do declare. Yeah. So we released a video sometime, was it last year at some point?
I think so. Maybe early last year.
Yeah, we put up a video on our YouTube channel called Magnified Pod, an introduction that kind of goes a little bit more in depth than we will right now. That kind of gives our backstories and our thoughts on what we want the podcast to be and what we want the community to be. So if you want a little bit more of a nuanced discussion between me and John about our stories and what we're doing here and what the point of the podcast is, you should go check that out.
Yeah.
But suffice it to say, John and I, college buddies, we both grew up in the Christian alternative scene. I have since left Christianity and identify as an atheist. And I won't speak for your current, how you identify, because sometimes I feel like the words I use kind of change. They change from time to time. So I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I say atheist. Sometimes I say humanist. Sometimes, I don't know. It just, it changes. But yes, but even despite my changing beliefs and my non-belief in God, this community and these bands and the experience growing up in the scene are still hugely important to me, and still conversations that I think are worth having.
Yeah. And as we've said a few times, like I still identify as a Christian today. I sort of have always been on the periphery of evangelical culture and know it well, and have sort of cast off any remaining attachments to it. So I come from, a slightly different place in terms of how I came into the stuff growing up and how I relate to it now. But I think we both have landed in a very similar place in terms of, regardless of where we were or where we are, these were artists that meant a lot to us then and still mean things to us now. And there's plenty to unpack in terms of what is troubling about it and what is still great about it. And that, there's a lot of thoughtfulness going on, even within the trappings of the scene of the 90s, this alternate, what do we always say? The Christian bookstore alternate universe. Yes. And the specific trappings of that world and the 90s youth group culture and stuff. But before I get too much further, I feel like I need to wet my whistle a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you got going over there?
Well, for any new listeners, this might this is new to you, but to all of the old Magpod heads out there, I'm drinking an Old Flame because
and original.
First off, I ran out of bourbon. So for those who are curious, an Old Flame is a cocktail that I invented that is it's my old fashioned recipe, but instead of bourbon or rye, I add Fireball.
Yeah, man.
And it
Reese
has
Roper style.
Oof, man. Reese Roper, love the dude. Dude loves his Fireball.
Yeah.
But it is delicious. You might think that this sounds awful, but everybody who has tried it, they're always skeptical at first. And then they're like, this is delicious and could be very dangerous because it's so easy to drink.
Yeah, man. It's like the liquid version of sucking on some Trader Joe's Cinedragons.
Ooh, hell yeah.
Which I have with me. We often will have a candy on hand or a drink on hand for folks who aren't familiar with that. And these Cinedragons, I sent you a text about these.
I did see them at Trader Joe's recently, and I picked them up and I thought about it, but I'm like, I don't know. I've never really leaned towards cinnamon candy.
Sure.
And I guess when I think of cinnamon candy, I think of like fireballs, like the small little fireball candies that I was always worried that I was gonna choke to death on because they're round and you're just imagining myself inhaling it and it getting lodged in my esophagus and
But hot tamales, you weren't a hot tamales guy?
I wasn't a hot tamales guy. I was
delightful.
I was a Mike and Ike fan, and you liked the Good and Plenty, the devil's candy,
the most divisive and wonderful candy that exists. But no, these Cinedragons, just saying, pair nicely
with an Old Flame.
With an Old Flame. And
what do you wet in your whistle with?
This is from Omni.
Ooh,
Twin Cities Brewery.
Yeah, it is.
I was just up in the Twin Cities, and
you sure were.
Jenny and I were at a bar, and it was like I had some sort of. I should have texted you about this. It was like so this hotel we stayed at specialized in hygge and like Scandinavian coziness, and they had a sauna and hot tub and lots of aquavit on the menu. It was wonderful. I like an aquavit because it tastes like licorice.
Gross.
Like Good and Plenty's. But a lot of those
good
Scandies. A lot of the Scandies are down in their salted up licorice. and washing it down with some aquavit, which also tastes like licorice. But I had a dill aquavit.
That
So
sounds fucking trash.
it's like the liquor equivalent of a weird beer.
Ugh.
And I just had it neat.
Dill
and
and licorice. I can't imagine a more foul or repugnant combination of flavors.
It's like my two faves. It's basically like you put some good and plenties in a pickle and you eat it up. Oh, it was delightful. Anyway, get yourself a dill aquavit. But no,
did Jenny make you like power wash your mouth before she would kiss you again?
She was into it, and she's not necessarily a licorice person, so I will say, delightful.
Jenny, come on. So what is this Omni beer that is not dill licorice?
It's called Melt. Smoothie Sour Series,
Okay.
Megaberry, Blackberry, Strawberry, and Raspberry together. 6.3 ABV. And, I smoothie sour, I'm not totally sure. Vanilla beans and milk sugar, sometimes, as I've said, not a fan of
Yes.
the, lactose flavor sometimes, but I feel like I'm intrigued. The sour, the berry, a brewery I enjoy. So I'm pouring this out right now. The can did not explode all over my microphone, which I was a little worried about.
Yes.
Well, that's
we
good.
have learned to never open beers near the microphone.
Yeah, it was all kind of banged up and stuff from being in my car. So I was like, this could go wrong. No, this is very good. It's very berry, like sour heavy. The vanilla sugar aspect of it is further back in the palate, whereas the berry and the sour is more upfront. So into it.
Yeah. Speaking of Minnesota breweries, I'm not sure if you were aware or if you've heard about Tin Whiskers is going to be closing its doors.
Oh, bummer. I like their stuff.
Yeah. So if you like weird beers, Tin Whiskers has a lot of weird flavored, like a marshmallow beer and like a peppermint, like a peppermint patty kind of beer. And but they did have a on the podcast. It was during our Magnified Pod series. We were John and I were drinking all the different pumpkin beers, and I had a Tin Whiskers pumpkin beer, and it was easily one of the worst beers I've ever had.
That's right. I feel like I already say that.
It was like, it didn't taste like anything. Sure. It didn't taste like cinnamon. It didn't taste like pumpkin. It didn't taste like spice. It didn't have any hop flavor. I'm like, did I just get like a really bad old beer from the liquor store? Or I would be surprised if there's somehow got an old seasonal beer.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this sucks. But I had
maybe that's why they're closing.
They're one of their flagship beers blows, and they but no, they've been open for a while, and they have a really cool space. And I was there last night doing some trivia, and just thinking like, man, I need to get Johnny Potts on my trivia team, because you would have been all over some of these.
Man, I was ready. I had Super 8 at the ready for you. I know that was
you sure did.
One of the questions. Just
for the record, we did not text John to cheat.
No, yeah.
Oh, we already had the answer.
Sure.
And I was like, because one of the things was movies. It was the picture round, so you had to look at a picture, and you had to, of a movie, and you had to guess what the movie it was. But it was all movies that ended in numbers. So
I'm trying to think of. I can think of movies with numbers, but not too many that end in numbers now.
Yeah, there was like Ocean's 11,
sure.
Apollo 13.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, like the Magnificent Seven. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I have any of those on DVD for you to borrow, but they're all good. Yeah, we were texting about, the Unbelieving Vegans will be a kick-ass band / trivia team when I'm finally up there, which due to the housing market, it might be a little while. Might be a while before I get up there. We'll see. Hopefully not too long of a while.
No, I hope not, man. It's the fact that you were up here. I know you were having a weekend or an evening away sans kids for the first time in how many years now?
2.5 years. Yeah. But who's counting?
Oh God, man.
Yeah, it was only this is too boring of a story to include in the pod, but why not?
We've talked about gutters on the pods.
Gutters are taken care of. There's no problems there,
bro. I did get my gutters cleaned.
Nice.
I did. Yeah, I cleaned them. Not
okay.
Didn't.
Well
anyway,
done.
Yes.
The years that I've considered doing it, I'm just like, I can't get my ass up on that roof. It sounds too hard. What was it? Oh yeah, boring story. So we're gonna have a little more time in Minnesota, but we had a COVID scare just before we left, where the kids came into our room Friday morning. We were supposed to leave Saturday morning, saying, "My head hurts. My head is hot," which is the exact same thing they said when we all got COVID the previous time. So we're like, shit. So they stayed home from school. We went and got a PCR test. We couldn't leave until we got the test results back, which were negative. And we're just kind of like, oh yeah, kids just like get sick, which we sort of forgot about because they've been wearing masks and we haven't been getting sick.
Right.
But now that half the kids at school aren't wearing masks again, where we are, of course the kids got cold. So anyway, just a cold, but it did shorten our Minnesota trip. So it was really just kind of like seeing family. And then we had that night away. So we didn't get that sweet bro hanging time, but next time we're going to do it, man.
Next time when it's nicer out too.
Yeah. Some people are saying Magpod reunion.
Yeah.
2.0 summertime.
I think that's what people are saying.
We'll have our recording equipment in order this time.
Yes. Not going to blow it this time. Yes. So, for those of you who are new and are still hanging with us, this is usually kind of how the pod goes. We have a first half of the episode is us bullshitting about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Got some other segments that we're going to come up on, and then we're going to be talking about the album in the second half of the show.
Yeah.
John, we have a new segment. Without further ado, let's introduce a brand new segment that we're calling the Winner's Circle. Now, OG Magpod heads might think, now, wait a second. This segment is just a repackaged version of the takes. And I would say, how dare you make such an accusation?
Some people said the takes and Joy Boys are very distinct segments. Always cover different ground, much like Winner's Circle will.
Yes. So Winner's Circle is going to be, I guess it's sort of a mashup of the takes and Joy Boys, because Joy Boys was something that was making us happy, bringing us joy. The takes didn't always have to be something positive, but I feel like the Winner's Circle is something where we want to shout out something that is just a straight up win, something that we love, something that we want to put up on a pedestal, put them into the Winner's Circle, and highlight something that rules.
Winners never quit, as Pedro tells us.
That's true.
On the album we'll cover next week. So
they sure don't. So John, I almost stole.
Our same one?
What?
Our same? Do we have the same winner?
We don't.
Oh, what did you almost steal?
I was gonna say, like, I wanted to talk about a certain film. Because we haven't had a chance to discuss it.
Right.
But
it turns out he's my winner.
Yes.
I got a couple winners this week. The winners respectively are Batman and myself. And so I'll cover a couple things here. But yeah, I feel like the Batman is the big thing that we missed out on talking about. I mean, there's been all kinds of like political things and personal things, and I'm just like, fucking Batman. That's all I think about. I can't remember if I don't think we talked about it at all on the pod, but I'm a huge Batman fan. I was sort of approaching this new movie with like a little bit of skepticism, although the closer we got to it, the more hyped I was getting.
Yes.
And then when I was watching the movie, I was just like, this is incredible. And was like it's maybe, I don't know if I could say it's my favorite Batman movie, but I think it like captures aspects of the Batman comics that no other Batman movie has. And I remember we talked about this with our dude Tyler Huckabee a while ago, and you were expressing skepticism about it, and you were kind of like, I don't know, are we at a point where we're like celebrating a dude who's like a billionaire vigilante beating up poor people of color in the streets that we want right now? And we were like, well, I don't know, like I trust Matt Reeves, we'll see what he has to say. And I gave you a little bit more of a spoiler than you wanted when I saw it right away, but I will just say that
yeah, you saw it like the second it came out, and you're like, you started like texting me. I'm like, bro.
I thought that at that point you were like, your position was you were not so sure about this Batman, so I wanted to be like, you're gonna like it, dude.
I know I was, but I already had the tickets ready, locked and loaded, ready to go that opening weekend.
Well, I'm not going to spoil anyone. I mean, by the time this comes out, it's been out for a while, but it's coming to HBO Max soon, so maybe people haven't.
Here's
seen
the thing:
it.
like, we need to be able to talk about it. So, if you haven't seen the Batman, spoilers coming at you. Skip ahead.
Yeah. Cover up your bat ears.
Yeah. Put your, go down into your bat cave, and we'll let you know when it's safe to come back up.
Yeah. So one of my favorite parts about it was that scene that was a central part of the trailers where he's, beating up this gang, and they're like, he's merciless with them, and they're like, who the hell are you? And he's like, vengeance. That like it's plays in the trailer, like you're like, yeah, Batman, beat the shit out of those guys. But like in the story, it's the first time.
Not my response at all.
No, I know, but I'm saying like I think it felt like that's kind of what they were trying to do by putting that in the trailers, which I think is what your concern was, which I shared. Along with just like, do we need another grim and dark Batman? And it's like, turns out we do. So that's the first time we see him in the story. And like what you also see in that scene is like what he's trying to do ostensibly is like save this other guy who this gang is harassing. And Batman takes care of these gang members. But then the guy that he's trying to save is like, don't hurt me. And Batman's like, oh shit, maybe like I'm screwing this up. And the course of the story is more about like, what does it mean to be vengeance? Like, is that a true legacy of being a hero? Is he actually like achieving things by supposedly striking fear into the hearts of people, or is there more to the role that he can play and kind of learning that? So by the end, it's less about finding people to punch and punish and more about finding hope and trying to represent hope for the city and look for ways to like help, which maybe sounds like simple, but I feel like it's a pretty cool arc for a Batman story. And it is very grim and dark, but I feel like in a way that's not like sort of wallowing in it. Like Batman is still a figure that you can sort of believe in, even in the midst of this kind of grimy story. And I really liked, one thing that we did talk about back when we talked about it on the pod was like being hyped at the like detective element of it, which the movies haven't really touched on. Yes. He's called the world's greatest detective in the comics. We haven't seen a ton of that in the movies to date. But we see a lot of it here. I mean, it's really kind of a crime serial killer mystery story.
It feels like a noir police procedural. He's like going around having, it sounds boring when you like he's going around and he's interviewing people, he's talking to people, trying to find like
it's
clues.
Cool though. Yeah.
But it's so great, and it's so long and so great. You're put more Batman in front of me. But
yes,
that was the thing I was so excited about, that it wasn't just going to be, I was relieved that it wasn't just like a baddie of the week kind of situation where it's just punching his way out of every situation. And and also I feel like the stakes were super high, that Batman doesn't swoop in and save everybody every time. And so when you raise the stakes, it feels like there's something to lose. And if there's nothing to lose, then there's no tension. If there's no tension, then why am I even watching the movie? And also, if the person I'm supposed to be rooting for isn't learning anything, then it's like, well, why am I rooting for this person if they're if they suck? And Batman coming to this conclusion that like he's having an influence on Gotham, but it's maybe not the influence he wants to be having,
Right.
which I think I'm like, finally, like a superhero movie with a little bit more nuance about like, is violence and vengeance and revenge the way to go? Because that's his whole thing. His parents were murdered, and he spent this whole time like trying to punish the people that were corrupt and making Gotham a terrible place, and he wanted to be vengeance for his dead parents and avenge his parents, and channeling his anger into ways that ultimately you see were like he was inspiring the wrong people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The aspect of sort of escalation is in like some of the movies, like the Dark Knight trilogy gets into sort of like having a Batman causes a Joker. But this really deals with the whole idea of like, what does it mean to sort of be this figure in a really interesting way? You know, a lot of the movies he's sort of like in the shadows, or we don't see him that much, or he's like very growly voiced. And this time it's like he's pretty much front and center for like a lot of the movie. Like he's Bruce Wayne a tiny bit, but he's mainly Batman, and we see him like a lot in his costume in places with like lights on him. And I think that lends itself well to like how weird it really is that he's like dressing up as a bat and walking around, because everybody's like, you really want this guy here? And it's like, yeah, I vouch for him, but it's like truly weird what he's doing. And I feel like it acknowledges that and kind of like gets into, okay, so what does it mean to be the Batman? And like you said, it takes a long time with it. It really like revels in its setting. And I'm on record as being like, make movies weirder and longer. I have no problem with a nearly 3-hour grimy noir style Batman movie. Make it longer, I say. But yeah, they really made this world just a place that you want to like. It's a dark place, but it's like a place that I just find so cool and interesting, and I just want to like live in this Gotham and see all these characters. And the music is so cool, and it's very like cinematic in a way that a lot of the movies haven't been, with like interesting shots and like these close-ups and
soundtrack, bro.
The sound is great. I love the score. It's just, yeah,
Nirvana.
Got your Nirvana in there. He's literally Bruce Wayne is got his hair dripping over his face in the Batcave listening to Nirvana. Like that's this is an emo Batman. I'm here for it.
Can we also talk about Jeffrey Wright as James
so
Gordon?
Good, man. The cast to a person is like perfect. I love everybody.
I know.
But yeah, Jeffrey Wright, he's one of my dudes. He's perfect.
He's so good. He crushed that Gordon mustache too.
So good. Yes.
So good.
From your favorite friend, who does this mean anything to you? That's how he talks.
Yeah. But there was a tweet that you shared with me that I think for people who've already seen it, kind of succinctly describes the arc as that Batman starts the movie searching in the corners of the night for the evil of the city so that he can punch it, and ends with looking for the good so that he can save it.
Yeah. It's an important distinction.
Yes. And so some people might be like, oh, is this like a soft Batman, a soft emo Batman? And it's like, look, if you want to watch 1,000 other superhero movies,
right,
where there's people getting punched or people getting shot or people being thrown through brick walls, and there's some sort of amorphous thing flying around in the sky to shoot down, and aliens are destroying the city. Those movies exist.
Right.
This is something I think that has a little more nuance, and talk about raising the stakes. If he, at the end of this movie, where everything just goes to shit, and now he needs to, he's like, Gotham is like in a worse place than it was when the movie started.
Yeah,
so now he's shifting the way he's thinking, and things are worse. I think that makes it all the more interesting. Like, how is he going to do that?
Right.
So that makes me so much more interested in how a detective or a
Yeah.
superhero fights for justice without doing what Batman typically does, and beating the shit out of people.
Yeah.
So
Totally. I think that aspect is one like piece of what makes it feel like unique and different and cool to me, which is that it really feels like a comic book. And what I mean when I'm saying that is not like, I feel like people think like comic booky, and you often think like, cheesy or over the top or whatever, but this is like the only Batman movie to have like a Batman narration, which just rules. And I could picture like, the captions in the panels of how he's saying things. And even like the Joker scene, which I initially was sort of like, do we really need more Joker? But I was like, I can picture the dialogue of that scene and like how it would lay out in the panels on a page so perfectly. And it plays like such a perfect comic book moment, because it's like, that's what you would get, is one little bit of Joker like at the end. And what you're saying about like how we're sort of setting up future stories feels very comic booky, where it's like he's had this thing, he's changed, but there are more stories to come. And it's not in like a franchisey, like you'll have to watch the next one way. It's like, this is actually a character who's like going through things, and the story sort of is ongoing. And man, I just love it so much.
Yeah. And it gives me like Harry Potter vibes. Like, you remember when Harry realizes that his father James, which he's like thought it was like this perfect saint, and was like, he was just in like his mind, his father is like perfect and never did anything wrong. And then he sort of like learns, oh, actually his dad was kind of an asshole to Snape. Yeah. And maybe Snape has justification to be skeptical about Harry and to kind of hold this grudge against him and his dad. It's like that kind of same thing happened like with Bruce, feeling like this person that I thought I was fighting for was also part of a system that sucked. And that to me is like another stake. It's like it adds more complexity to the character. And it's one of my critiques of Dune. It's like, I don't care about any of the characters, but like so many things about Bruce and Batman make me feel like I can understand his motivations. I get what he's doing and why, and like watching that sort of shift, I can track that. That
makes me want to put a gum jabbar to your neck and put your hand in the pain box, but that's fine. I hear you. Yes, totally. I
didn't know you were part of the Quetzalcoatl Haderach or whatever.
Right. The Bene Gesserits.
The Bene Gesserits.
In the Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh boy, let's start a Dune pod. Let's start a Batman pod.
Absolutely not.
Do a Dune pod by myself, and we'll do a Batman pod. But no, they're doing a TV show of some kind that extends this universe. Which again, I was a little bit skeptical before I saw the movie about like, oh, they're already planning like a whole franchise and TV and movies, but I'm like, give me as much of this world as you can. I will watch whatever they put together for this iteration of Gotham. And as you said, it's like touching on issues of systemic injustice and stuff in a way that like is not often grappled with. So
and like
here for it.
You understand, like, even though the Riddler is a serial killer, like it like highlights the disparity between like who gets resources.
Right.
The rich people who already have resources get all of them, and the people without resources get screwed over time and time again. Yeah. So you're like, even though he's a monster, he's like, his gripe and his frustrations are legitimate.
Yeah.
So I think that too, you're like, I mean, this actual terrible serial killer monster makes a good point,
Yeah. Right.
Like, there aren't too many movies that do that. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah. The scene that kind of turns for him when he's like, Bruce Wayne. I was just like, oh shit, what is going to happen?
Yeah. That scene was unbelievable.
Yeah. So good.
That scene in Arkham. Ugh.
Creepy.
I feel like we've been talking about Batman
probably like too long. Sorry, everybody. Very, very pumped about the Batman. He's one of my winners. My other winner is me. This will be very quick. I'm a winner because of the like 8 concerts I'm going to in the next 2 months.
Ooh, well, yeah.
fingers crossed that COVID wave BA2 doesn't happen and half of these get canceled. But I'm seeing Pup this weekend, seeing Pedro the Lion very shortly. Me Without You farewell tour. I got my tickets. Amel and the Sniffers have talked about coming. Got my Haim tickets. I've got my Phoebe Bridgers tickets. So it's gonna be a good couple months for your boy, assuming all goes well. So anyway, those are my winners.
Yes. I'm just gonna tag on to that I'm also going to be seeing a bunch of shows this summer. I'm going to be seeing Ministry next week.
Cool.
I'm going to be seeing local band Kiss the Tiger. Also going to be seeing Pedro. Also going to be seeing Me Without You. Going to be seeing Jeff Rosenstock and Catbite, which is rescheduled from this last month. And I'm going to be seeing Motion City Soundtrack.
Hell yeah.
I'm going to be seeing Weird Al. I'm going to be seeing the Wild Hearts tour.
The
Wild Hearts. It's Sharon Van Etten, Angel Olsen, and Julian Baker.
Right. We have talked about this plenty. I forgot that's what they were going.
Yes. So just so many good things coming up. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah.
But speaking of music, and my winners, and again, I feel like I've mentioned them before, but I just haven't been able to talk about them as much as I want to. And that is the Linda Lindas. And I love them so much. If you're not familiar with the Linda Lindas, they are a riot girl punk band from LA made up of young girls of color. And I say girls because they are actually children.
Very young.
The oldest one just turned 17 and the youngest is 11.
You're their doting father.
I talk about them like they are my children because I'm like just so
proud of them.
So proud.
You girls are doing so well.
They're doing so well. They are. They got signed to Epitaph. They did. They just blew up, and I'm just
opening for Jawbreaker.
I know it's unbelievable. The success that they're having, and the week that this episode comes out, their debut LP, Growing Up, will be coming out on April 8th.
Cool.
So if you haven't checked them out, you should, and you should also check and see if you can get tickets if they're coming to your area. But they're playing unbelievable. They're playing in LA the week this episode comes out with Face to Face and Jawbreaker. I can't even handle that. But I just love their pop punk energy and their riot girl aesthetic and their nod to Bikini Kill and the old school riot girl bands of the 90s. So and they're just great. So I'm just so excited to see a younger generation coming up in punk, and that an established punk rock record label like Epitaph is supporting that. And that any number of people can probably be punk rock gatekeepers about well, do they know their punk history? It's let's let new generations, punk doesn't need to be stuck in 1977, and the best albums of all time don't always and consistently need to be only albums from the 60s. Let's let music keep evolving. Let's let artists create art and express themselves. And I love watching what they're doing. And the first time I saw their music video for Growing Up, I was like, holy shit, these guys are just
Very talented.
They're very talented, and
yeah,
I'm just so happy to see them be so successful and get like endorsement deals and but they're like watch some of their Instagram lives and they're like talking about book reports and stuff. Like, oh right, because you're children.
You're young children.
And you're in school.
Totally agree. That rules. They will not be at Pitchfork Festival, but I failed to mention that that's another show I'm planning to go to, which if I didn't say this already, day 2 of Pitchfork is Mitski, Lucy Dacus, Low, Japanese Breakfast, Ice Age, The Armed. Oh man, I got to go to that. So anyway, lots of shows for your boys coming up.
Yep. Oh, also I should mention that between the ending of last season and starting now, I also saw Lucy Dacus at First Avenue.
Yeah, laying on the couch.
She was on the couch because of her back, and she was unbelievable.
Man.
And she just released a shirt that is so amazing, and it says Lucy Dacus, music for hot people.
She rules. Did you get that like metal-y shirt that she had?
Oh yeah. Oh, I got that. I got that. It's incredible. I love her so much.
That rules. Yes, I'm very bummed to have missed her. Hope to rectify that at Pitchfork.
Yes. Yep.
Lots of winners. I can't make any promises about Batman not being on my winner circle every week. A lot of Batman content to get to. Thanks for indulging us this week.
Yes.
If you have any Batman takes or winners of your own, share them with us.
Please do.
Should we take a break here?
I think we should. Yeah, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking that debut full-length Pedro the Lion record. It's hard to find a friend. Hey, John.
Hey.
You're a fan of punk, right?
I think so.
I think so too. So, have you heard of Small Step Records?
The name is familiar, but tell me more.
Well, Small Step Records is a faith-based DIY record label with bands that are melodic punk, pop punk, easycore, emo, and ska. And they have some new albums and new bands releasing records right now on all streaming services. And you should check them out. Bands like Home Plate, which has like an easycore vibe. So if you're fans of Newfound Glory or 4 Year Strong, you should check them out. You got Grandpa Loves Rhinos, which is definitely got like a pop punk vibe going on.
Andrew, not only that,
they
are Magpod's first official sponsor.
Oh, really?
Starburst's got nothing on these guys. All right. These guys are the real deal. The tagline is love God, love others, listen to pop punk. You can go to smallsteprecords.com, check out the cool records and merch and bands they have, and we will be, through their generosity, offering some giveaways in the coming weeks and months on our socials of some of these Small Step Bands records. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Also, John, unlike some record labels, which may have come up over the course of the podcast, the artists on Small Step always keep 100% of the rights and ownership of their music.
Yes.
So any money that goes to Small Step goes directly back into supporting the bands. That is a huge deal when it comes to supporting artists, because oftentimes band puts out a record, they don't own their music, but this is a label with integrity. So you love to see it.
Love to see it. Small Step. Check them out.
Smallsteprecords.com.
What exactly makes Beyoncé the queen bee?
How do we feel about Ariana Grande's use of rap vernacular?
And most importantly, what's better, chamomile or spiced chai?
We ponder all of this and more on Hot Tea, Hot Takes, now a part of the Rock Candy Podcast Network.
Our show is just two friends drinking tea and discussing music, culture, politics, and anything else that comes to mind.
We cover everything from Mozart to Megan Thee Stallion.
New uploads are posted weekly. Look for it wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you soon.
Bye!
John, this is our podcast.
I
We're
was just about to do like the exact same thing. Andrew, it's time to talk about Pedro.
It's hard to find a friend.
Long
It's a
time
really
coming.
good record.
I've been waiting so long to discuss in depth Bazan and Pedro,
Yes.
someone who I love to discuss things with. So I'm very pumped for this. And there's plenty to get into.
Yeah.
As we said on the Patreon this week, we're talking the whole EP. Plenty to get into there too. But this is the beginning of what will be a run of records I'm very, very excited to dive into. And I've never really talked about records that have been like this important to me,
Sure.
this in depth in the way that we often treat our deep dives of discography. So very pumped. But there's a really central question I feel like we need to frame things around.
Yes, John, but I feel like if there's anybody that needs to be asked that question, it is you. So, John,
Okay.
I need to know, I must know,
Yes.
when did you first hear of Pedro the Lion?
Glad you asked. I first saw them in 2000 at the Foxfire Lounge in Minneapolis, which was my senior year of high school. It was this kind of coffee shop with a tiny stage downtown, RIP to that venue. But I kind of randomly saw them. I know that I had heard of them fairly close to that time because I knew the name, but not much beyond that. And I just kind of stumbled into the show. I don't even think I saw all of that, but I looked up the show online preparing for this week, and Velour 100 opened for them at the show.
No way.
We will be likely covering this season.
Yes.
So that was fun to see. I really have no memory of the show at all, other than kind of like picturing the scene at the time and maybe knowing a couple of the songs. But it really wasn't until the next year at college that I really got into them. That's when I went back and listened to It's Hard to Find a Friend, which we'll talk about today. And that's kind of when it really solidified. I think that was this would have been pre-Control coming out. And then I saw them again on what I think was the Control tour in maybe 2003 at Park West in Chicago. I didn't get Winners Never Quit or The Only Reason I Feel Secure until around that time. So, but I remember being like pumped for Control. I had the Control poster on my wall in college. So I did fail you by not running up to you and just putting the head, much like Garden State, putting headphones on your ears and saying the song will change your life.
Or Adam Scott going around with
Right.
with REM and in the hallways of the school, just being
Listen
like,
to this, get a load of this.
get a load of this.
Yes, but that's my background. When did you first hear Pedro the Lion?
So I first heard of Pedro from my cousin Justin,
Cool guy.
who was this was around the time, I think this would have been pre-Control.
Okay.
Because I think Winners Never Quit was maybe the more recent album that had come out, and he was talking about it and how he's like, I need to get this record, and how he was like a big fan of that record. And this is not a great story about me, because I'd never heard of Pedro, and he was talking about how awesome he was, and so he was listening to a lot of indie music stuff at the time. We liked a lot of the similar bands, and we went to Best Buy. This is back when Best Buy had a lot more CDs and a lot more music, and I found the Winners Never Quit CD in Best Buy, and I purchased it. It was the only one, and like, he wanted to get the record.
I see what you're saying.
And I was like,
It was a shitty move.
it was a shitty move, but
Could have burned it for him, bro.
are you saying that I should have stolen from your favorite artist?
Sorry. I mean,
Wow, Dave, if you're listening to this, I apologize.
I've given Dave so much of my money over the years. It's fine. He understands.
He gets it.
Support artists, everybody. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, we're just talking about small step and
I know.
giving
They
money.
do things right, okay? I don't. Be like small step.
John's
Not
a
like John.
monster.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, so I pretty much took that album out from under him, but I ended up getting it and being really, really into that record.
Cool.
But,
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that for whatever reason, like I think I had Control, like a digital copy of it, but I don't know what it was. I think my head was still so much in a punk rock place, a metal place.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, I don't know. I think if I had done the deep dive into Pedro that I think he deserved and that I'm doing now, I think it would have really tracked with some of the faith struggles that I was going through at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. He's talked about, I mean, he was on Mike Herrera's pod, as we said, first record on Tooth and Nail. He talked about how at that age, he was really listening to punk and metal and stuff too. His listening habits were much more hardcore than the music that he ended up making. And I think he said he didn't know exactly why it happened that way. It's kind of how his songs came out. Now there is a little screaming on the whole EP, which we won't hear in the main feed this week, but there's times when he dips into the harder edges that influenced him. And I think Control, ironically, is probably like, the punkest of his records you could have chosen to listen to, and he probably would have vibed with it in that respect. But it's not more traditional punk. But I use the exact same word when I was kind of thinking about my experience with him, was that I tracked with him like through pretty much each record. And I think that's a lot of the reason why people feel close to Bazan and Pedro, is like it was easy to sort of go along the faith journey that he was experiencing. And obviously that kind of like splits into different places for different people at various points. But for a lot of kids like us who are in the evangelical circles, but maybe struggling with aspects of it, as we've said, for the reasons that we appreciated, Five Iron and MXPX and other bands, he was clearly poking at that. I mean, the sort of struggling with faith, honesty about that struggle, criticism of aspects of the church and Christian hypocrisy, all that stuff was there from the very beginning, and only grew as he went on. But he was doing that from within the confines very much of the Christian bookstore world for those first few records. And I always appreciated that. And it obviously only grew and like took a turn with Control, where that was the first record where bookstores were asking not to have that album in stock, and starting to have some, another reason that there's such a big sort of intense following of his is this interaction that he does with the audience. That's kind of a big part of it. He does these Q&As at shows. As we said, we'll get into some of the questionable things I asked him at various shows. He's kind of like, he kind of pioneered the like living room show thing, which is like what a lot of smaller artists are doing these days to make more money, where you're just playing people's living rooms in various small venues. But I think people feel really connected to him. And so a lot of people kind of felt like he was maybe making a space for them that they appreciated. And then they felt like a little betrayed by like, there were these glimpses of like, wait, is he leaving the faith? And like with Control, that was kind of the beginning of that for a lot of people, where I remember him being asked some heated questions at these shows and him trying to handle it with grace. And even me, like, I was always kind of like, yeah, great, Control, whatever, fucking tell these bookstores what's up. But even I remember seeing him, this must have been like 2005, maybe. Jenny was living in New York at the time for the summer, and I went out there and we saw him at the Knitting Factory. And he said during the show, somebody asked him during the show, "Are you a Christian?" Which is like the number one question Bazan has ever gotten asked at any venue. And his answer, I'd heard him be asked that a bunch of times in the past, and he always kind of said versions of like, yeah, but not like the way that we see Christians represented, whatever. And this time he just said, no, or something like, there's something to what those people are talking about, but it's not what they're talking about. And I remember just processing with Jenny on the subway back, like, what do you think he meant? Like, is he leaving his faith? Because like for me at the time, it was like, this guy has tracked with me through these records. I feel like I've been with him every step of the way. And now I feel like, oh, this guy that I thought we were like very similar is suddenly like maybe moving in a different direction, which is funny now because I'm just like, I don't give a shit what some guy says on stage at a show about his faith. But like at the time, you know, I was still forming my sort of identity, and he was an important figure to me. And that obviously changed as he kind of went solo, and Curse Your Branches, I think, which I mentioned earlier, his first solo LP is one of those records that means a lot to a lot of people too, because that's truly his sort of, you know, they called it a breakup record with God. That's kind of where he's fully moving to outside of the Christian world and articulating that. And I think that was helpful for a lot of people who were deconstructing at the time. And it was,
wasn't even a term. Like,
right.
That wasn't even a thing. Like, there were, I think, you know, when you think about the early 2000s, and you know, like it was probably would have been called like backsliding or losing his faith or something. But like the whole idea of deconstruction, there really wasn't that whole concept. I had been tracking with him for each of these records, you know, and like we were saying, like acoustic emo early stuff to harder rocking political stuff, and then to weirder synthy stuff, which I was following him into gladly, like musically and narratively. But when he got into the Headphones album and the solo stuff was much more bleepy bloopy, and I was like, oh yeah, into this. But Curse Your Branches, as much as I loved it and love it still, it was kind of the first time that like I felt like I was like maybe struggling a bit with like, oh, we're not in the same place anymore, which is fine. It was just like I felt so connected to him and so long, and it was like he was kind of articulating this unraveling of his faith, where he's like, well, he'd always thought of, you know, like Genesis as literal, and so when he got to the point of being like, well, if that's not literal, then like what is any of this stuff? Which obviously like I totally understand, and we've talked about that kind of, you know, that line of thinking on the pod before, and I get why for a lot of people that's kind of the beginning of the end. And for me, I'm like, but there's a middle ground between like everything in the Bible is literal and God doesn't exist. So I don't know. There's so much to chew on. His narratives are largely, at least in the sort of Pedro 1.0, you know, we should say that they formed in Seattle in 1995. Bazan is kind of the only mainstay of the band. He's the only guy that's been in the band the whole time. In 2006, they broke up, and that's when he went solo. And we'll kind of get into in this season sort of what led to him going solo and why he reformed as a band in 2017 and resurrected the Pedro name. But the sort of pre-breakup Pedro is all these fictionalized first-person narratives of people struggling with sort of moral choices. Flannery O'Connor is an author who gets invoked a lot when comparing Bazan's lyrics and stories to hers, where they're sort of these characters who are flawed, facing sort of moral situations. But then with the solo stuff and the newer Pedro, it sort of shifted to being more actual first person, like his own perspective on things. So yeah, I think it was just a matter of sort of tracking with him even further as he went into those new directions. That was like, okay, I could go with him even as there was like a sort of break with what resonated with him about me when I was younger. Yeah. Should we talk about some of the other people in the band? Because this is specifically on this record, because you got Jonathan Ford, who is going to come up in probably more maybe a future season. He was in Roadside Monument and Unwed Sailor, and we did discuss talking about Unwed Sailor, but a little bit more difficult to discuss a band that is like primarily instrumental. So
yes, we've also, I mean, this is the season that's sort of the fuzziest around genre.
Fuzzy. Yeah, what is emo? What is indie? What is post-hardcore? You know, it's hard. It's a little amorphous.
Yeah, there's been like Roadside Monument is one that we had discussed talking about for this season, along with like Dear Ephesus and Braid and other bands that were like, we still want to do an emo season. And a lot of these bands slide a little more neatly into that. So probably some bands that you're thinking of, if we maybe haven't mentioned yet, may still go in that season later. So
yes. So don't worry.
Yeah, Jonathan Ford. I mean, Bazan plays most of the instruments on both Whole and It's Hard to Find a Friend. But Jonathan Ford is playing bass on these songs on It's Hard to Find a Friend. Bazan wrote all these songs. I mean, it's like a lot of simpler indie folk stuff early on in these first couple records. And he got increasingly sort of layered and adventurous musically and lyrically with each record, which is kind of why I was saying, like, I sort of tracked with him each time. Like I was like, ooh, I love It's Hard to Friend. Ooh, Winners Never Quit. That's better. Ooh, Control, like harder and political. But then like, ooh, Achilles Heel, bringing in some bleeps and bloops. Like I just loved kind of my taste was sort of going in the same direction as his with each record. But even like his vocal performance on these earlier records have that kind of straight tone, almost sort of like nasal emo vocal quality. But by the time he goes solo, he's starting to embrace like using his whole voice and using vibrato in a way that's like much fuller now. I interviewed him in maybe like 2006.
Humble brag.
Oh, right. For Sojourners magazine when I was working there. And that's when he was releasing his first solo EP, Fewer Moving Parts. And I loved it. And I was just like, whoa, like I was blown away by kind of how synthy it was. And there were so many different parts. And I was like, what made you kind of decide to do this? And he was saying that he spent too long trying to make albums that he could replicate on tour. And by the time he got to solo stuff, he was just like, well, I'm going to blow it all up and just do whatever I want, which I think is an interesting distinction because he sort of gets much more. There's a lot of parts, there's a lot of instruments, there's a lot going on with some of the later records. But I do feel like he pulls off the more straightforward, acoustic-y, stripped down stuff really well on these first couple of records too. Yeah, we should say It's Hard to Find a Friend, released November 3rd, 1998 on Made in Mexico. As we said, the whole EP was released on Tooth and Nail. Made in Mexico was founded by James Morelos, who is a publicist for Tooth and Nail. And I think they're primarily known for Pedro. Also Damian Jurado, who's like Bazan's partner for a lot of stuff over the years. They were like good friends in high school and have done a lot of stuff musically together. And then re-released on Jade Tree Records in 2001. It was recorded by Bazan at Casa Recording in Seattle. He copyrighted it under the name Juan the Owl Music, which I mentioned because back on the pedrothelion.org forums, my name was Juan the Owl. Shout out to the .org heads if you're out there. It was mastered by Rick Vaughn at Spectre in Washington. It's pretty lo-fi, but I think it works. It lends itself well to the sort of like confessional, intimate tone of this collection of songs. But it's not, I wouldn't call it ambitious. It's pretty stripped down. It's pretty straightforward. But I don't know. I really, really love this album. I am curious to hear if you feel similarly. I think there's like a power in the simpleness here. Those melodies and riffs are really memorable, which kind of makes sense because he's a storyteller in a way that lends itself well to just playing songs solo, like stripped down and that being compelling enough on its own. I've seen him play plenty of times where it's just him and acoustic guitar, and most of these songs are like stand up well enough for that format.
Right. So you had mentioned, and I want to kind of get a sense of this as, if and when there was a shift in his songwriting style. You'd mentioned that he was sort of taking, a lot of the songs were taking perspective of somebody else or writing about a character and not really necessarily like a first person experience for a lot of these songs. I mean, I didn't assume that Dave Bazan was a heroin user,
right?
But so is that correct that that some of these songs are more perspective and sort of telling a story, and is it a little bit more easy to figure out which ones are talking about himself versus a fictitious person or character he's created?
Yeah, I mean, I think he loves concept albums, and is starting right away with the whole EP, which, as you said, is sort of like these stories of heroin addicts. And then Winners Never Quit, also a concept album. Control is sort of like it is a concept album, but he didn't like intend for it to be, just kind of came out that way. So I think that's another thing he talked about when I interviewed him, is like he felt early on like he needed to address certain themes, and that like he would spend a lot of time thinking about how to craft these stories. And I think he often uses these fictional narratives as a way to sort of talk about his own struggles. So like, is it about heroin, or is that a metaphor for sort of sin and God? And are some of these It's Hard to Find a Friend songs, you know, stories of these people's doubts, or are they that as a way to talk about his own doubts and his own relationship to God? So I feel like it's clear to see the connection to sort of how he feels about things early on. But I think for the most part, really until he goes, well, maybe Achilles heel, but like kind of until he goes solo, most of the stuff I think is purely sort of imagined characters. And I'm sure that he has experiences that are similar to aspects of these songs, and they're all sort of first person. So sometimes the line is blurry. But I think they're mostly his attempts to sort of wrestle with things through these. I mean, infidelity is a huge theme throughout a lot of Zan and Pedro stuff. And this is odd because I know like so much about him, but he's divorced now, but only relatively recently, and he was married for a really long time. And I think he has talked about a lot of these songs about divorce were sort of his way of working through things, even while he felt like his marriage was strong and didn't have those sort of problems that he was exploring. But it was sort of his space to explore some of these darker thoughts. And I think that's kind of why people were starting to get mad at him, because they were like, well, you wrote the song about like having adultery as an affair in a hotel. And he's like, well, that's not me, that's a character. But I think it became difficult to sort of parse what was what and what he actually believed. I don't know. Is that a satisfying answer?
Yes. I mean, and I think it's one of those things that I have talked about on the pod too, that trying to be like, what's true, quote unquote true, what's first person, what's actual. I don't know. I don't know why that I have such a hard time with that sort of thing where I need to know if this is autobiographical or not. And it's like, it probably doesn't really actually matter.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it becomes really clear, like his songwriting style really changes with the like Curse Your Branches, because it's so like obviously there's no murder ballads and there's no infidelity. It's him just like being like, how do I make sense of my life now? And so again, when I interviewed him, he was saying like what he learned was that like good art, he felt, doesn't come from like trying to figure it out beforehand. He just kind of gave himself up to like letting whatever pour out of him. So that's been more the mode that he's been in, is just like, I wasn't necessarily planning to write a song or even an album about like my own personal faith, but that's just kind of what came out, and I had to sort of honor that. So I don't know. I like both approaches. I love a concept album. I love sort of, like I said, that Flannery O'Connor style, sort of like dark gothic vibe that he brings to songs about sort of like faith and how we're supposed to act and stuff. But I also appreciate when he just got totally honest and said stuff that was clearly his own experience that felt vulnerable too in its own way.
I don't know why. This is probably really stupid that it took me this long to make the connection between a good man is hard to find and it's hard to find a friend.
Yeah. I don't think it's stupid, because I've considered that, but I was like, is there actually something there? But now that you're mentioning, I'm like, there probably is. I feel like that's like, that story feels so much like something that Bazan would write. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's probably not a coincidence. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is an album about depression in a lot of ways. Which is reflected in the title. And, it's, gets into problems with church and faith and not always feeling that faith and the pressure to feel it. Which again is sort of an ongoing theme in a lot of Pedro and Bazan's stuff and a lot of what resonated with me at the time, and still resonates. So I don't know. That's all my table setting. Should we dive in? You want to go over anything else first?
No, I think it's about time.
Okay.
That we dive into our dude. That sounds.
Been diving into this dude for 20 some years.
All right. So, opening track of Up and Coming Monarchs.
Sunken ships rest upon the ocean floor, where I've made my home, to dodge the draft once more. There once was a time one could flee to the north, but Canada's not what she used to be. Boycott the war, well, she could not afford to. Thanks to the new American Queen.
Those harmonies were me. They were not on the record. I know it's hard to believe. I also said American King versus Queen, which is what he says on the album, because I remember at the time he changed it to King because he was taking a dig at George W. Bush. This is my number one.
This is my number one.
Hell yeah. I'm so excited to hear that. I love this song.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was seeing some commentary about this song and whether there was like more of a shift in meaning once Bush became president, and then the Iraq War and Afghanistan War, everything kind of started, whether there was sort of a change in meaning. And I guess to your point, he was changing it because of George W. Bush. But I was like reading some of this commentary, I'm like, this song was released during the Clinton era, so I'm not sure like what exactly, but that makes more sense if he was, because this was re-released later during the Bush administration.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like its themes apply sadly to any time, because it's about sort of escaping from war, obviously how things changed in the next few years he maybe couldn't have anticipated, but like this idea of draft dodging being, at least in the way I interpret it, sort of like synonymous with suicide here. He's imagining life underwater, the only place he can be free, whether that means he's just sort of actually imagining that, or whether he chooses to die by suicide, by drowning. But it's about this idea of sort of, it's called of Up and Coming Monarchs, like the idea that you can't escape war anywhere, whether you're under the sea, you can't go to Canada because Canada's not what she used to be either. Sort of implying that like the empire is spreading and other places are beholden to the US in a way that they weren't before. So it's like, well, I can either escape to under the sea or to death. Very bleak, kicking things off bleak, but I just think it's so pretty. Like, I think that central hook is so like, I don't know, soothing to me. Yes.
And while everything is not glossy, there is a style to Bazan's guitar playing that is very unique. he's not hammering on a bunch
Right.
of chords and power chords, and oftentimes he's just playing singular notes.
Yeah. Right.
And I think the first time I heard that, especially on Winners Never Quit, with the opening, Slow and Steady Wins the Race. That was
just kind of notes. Yeah.
It was just notes, and it sounds like it's on a classical guitar or nylon string guitar.
I was just gonna say very much nylon string vibe on both those records.
And I'm like, this is such a unique style and sound, and even it just all feels very restrained.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe my heart wasn't prepared to find slowcore in the 90s and early 2000s when I was very much so into anything punk and metal and hard,
Right. I totally get that. I mean, like I said, it wasn't really until 2001-ish that my heart was maybe prepared. I feel like I was, again, sorry, Bazan, I was downloading a lot of these songs on Kazaa in my dorm room.
Bro, same.
And this feels very lumped in with like Bright Eyes and I don't know, other bands and artists of that period for me. I was going to Makeout Club, where it's just like these sort of intimate, folky, intense songs. So I sort of lump all those together. And I think I was ready at that point to sort of like, it doesn't need to be fast and hard to like hit me hard. And
right.
I like the guitar parts and the bass line a lot on the song and other songs here where it feels there's just kind of like a warmth to it. And into it.
Yeah. I was just thinking of, you were saying downloading Bright Eyes, and 1000% I was downloading like Fevers and Mirrors, and I was trying to think of, I was looking at other similar artists on Spotify. It's like listening to Appleseed Cast, and
totally,
The Anniversary, and
100%,
all these other sort of indie bands that were a little bit more electric guitar driven than Pedro was. Maybe not as slow as Pedro. So I guess I tended to lean more towards them. And there's something too about Bright Eyes. When I was listening to some of those early records, I was like, wow, Connor Oberst, he sucks, but he's so good. like I'm like, this guy cannot sing, but like I really love what his lyrics and his guitar playing.
Well, I don't know what you mean, Andrew. I think he sounds great. Anyway, was that good?
Killing it. So I don't know. There's something about Pedro that like it didn't keep drawing me in enough. And now that I'm doing a proper deep dive now, I'm like, man, I really think this could have been helpful. I really think a lot of his writing could have been helpful for me. Yeah.
Well, sorry I wasn't a good enough Pedro evangelist to you to say.
Clearly,
hey, get into this stuff.
You were downloading it, so you're like, I'm not really that invested in this guy.
I have paid for every Bazan release. All right, everybody.
At Dave Bazan.
Wait till you get a load of this.
You will not believe this shit. Anything else you want to say about that song, or should we move on?
It's good. Let's move on.
All right. The Longer I Lay Here.
1, 2, 3.
I'm already depressed.
With the sunrise and down when the world's been down, with excellence, industry, diligence, natural
It's great.
It's a great song. So this is sort of what we were referencing earlier before we started talking about the records. A far more evangelical bent to some of these songs, kind of the a lot of what we called last season the "I'm a piece of shit" song. And whether or not he's actually talking about himself, he's this idea that like you're broken, you're sinful, you're in need of help because of your human condition, and Jesus is the one that can help with that. This is a little bit more poetic than some of the other lyrics of the pop punk and skate punk bands we discussed, but still similar in tone nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we'll talk about Whole on the Patreon, but even more on that record are there I'm a piece of shit and only God can fix that songs. But what I feel is different, especially on It's Hard to Find a Friend versus that, is like, I think what makes it distinct for me is that like it's about a struggling with depression or belief and God being a comfort rather than I'm awful. How could you even love me? I know I'm going to screw up again, but you take me in. This is more just like a plea and a sort of peace with the comfort that comes from asking God for help. I don't know. It feels to me like maybe I'm making, distinctions that aren't really there, but like, it just feels more sort of, I don't get bummed out. I mean, as you said earlier, I get bummed out because these are songs about being depressed, not because I'm like, this theology bums me out necessarily.
Right. And it's also different because he's like being more specific, because he's talking about like being lazy. Like he's like not doing anything. And like he's talking about somebody who's just like starting the day, they're industrious, they're doing shit. And he's like, I don't want to do anything. Like, and that's better than being like, just in general, my entire humanity, I'm a giant piece of shit.
Right. It's not about like lusting either, which is a nice change.
That is a nice change of pace.
I don't want to presume to speak for both of us, but I'll just go ahead and say this is relatable content for your boys.
Oh my God.
A prayer for help from depression. Like, I don't know. It's sort of, it manifests as what he calls laziness, but I think anyone who struggled with depression understands the POV here. Like, all I can say is get that therapy, bro.
Get that therapy. Get that ADHD medication. Like I just did. Just being able to have some level of motivation to care about something and
totally
do anything and think clearly, depression and anxiety, man. And it's there are some songs on other Pedro albums that are like laziness and lethargy personified in like the music. You're just like you feel like you're like falling asleep the way you're just like, oh God, he just does such a good job at that.
That's usually, he does a lot of like real slow album closers that kind of feel like you're drunk when you're listening to it, and sort of like a story about somebody who's in a bad way.
Protect the Family Name is the one I'm specifically thinking.
Definitely. Man, can't wait to get in the record.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, he says it sounds so ridiculous, but I just can't like this, and it feels that way in the midst of feeling that, but it's like it's not actually ridiculous when you learn about getting healthier. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I was thinking of what is that movie, Manchester by the Sea? I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but
I've heard of it, have not seen it.
Deals very much with sort of the trauma that this character goes through and sort of the extreme depression that affects the way he sort of lives after that. But it's about this sort of like Boston working class community, and it's sort of like, not a big spoiler here, but whatever. It ends with like he has this big discussion with his nephew, and he's like, I can't beat it. And it's like, the whole of how to deal with depression summarized in like a very quick line. And it makes me even sadder because like I can't beat it. It sounds so ridiculous, but I just can't like this. I'm like, there are ways to get healthier though. And like this character in this movie is not going to therapy. This David Zahn character is not going to therapy yet, at least. But I'm just like, I don't know. Anyway, it hits me in a way because I'm like, I know it can feel like, God, why can't I just get my act together? And it's like, well, it's not. That's not a healthy way to look at what's happening. You know what I mean? So anyway, maybe I'm not articulating this well, but I'm just like, it hits me because it feels very relatable. But I'm also glad to be on this side of things where I'm just like, you don't have to look at it just being like, God, why this is so like sad and ridiculous. Why can't I just get my act together? Musically, sorry, was there something else you wanted to say?
No, I posted something on Twitter the other day just about, I had a tough therapy session earlier this week, and something that Doug, my therapist, and I talk about often is, and I say this because he talks about it and I'm bad at it, which is radical acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those things that you're just radically accepting how the reality of something, not necessarily being like, I'm depressed and just deal with it, but more so like situations, and that we can just radically accept a particular thing. And it's just like some of the stuff, like in theory and logically, like we can understand, you and I can both understand how depression manifests.
Mm-hmm.
And we can be like, I'm feeling lazy and I'm feeling X, Y, and Z right now. And I know it's because of depression. And we can try and logic our way out of our depression.
Right.
But that's so much harder
right.
than it sounds like it should be. And if I could logic and reason my way out of my mental health problems, I would be fine.
Right.
But I can't. And this like, I just can't lick this. I understand that. Just kind of throwing up your hands, me like, I don't know what to do, and I also have no energy to even try to do anything right now.
Right.
And so you're right. This is just very much on our wavelength, as you said.
Yeah. And to match that sort of narrative intimacy, the music is very intimate and quiet. You can hear his chair creaking. Yes. I mean, it's like, it's just those nylon strings on that acoustic guitar,
microphone in a room,
microphone and a metronome going. And as you said, the electric guitar comes in for a nice simple solo, again, just some notes. But it feels, some of these songs, I like some of the Pedro stuff that almost like leans in a sort of countryish direction, and that pace, and then that guitar solo almost feels a little like ding 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 ding. It's kind of that westerny sound, which
just a walking bass.
Yeah, it's great. So very much here for that. I don't know. I like the song.
Waiting for a little cowbell or a vibra slap or something.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
I mean, this isn't Cake or anything, but
oh, I'm depressed. That kind of thing.
Yes. Speaking of songs that sound like they would be a country song,
yeah,
song's called Big Trucks.
Big Trucks.
Just out here on the open road with my buddy Pedro. Got a big haul. Gotta bring it into town.
Dad, why did you let that man push you around like that? You should have beat him down to the ground for that. He said, sons, you're still young and you always jump the gun. There's real people in the big trucks flip off when they get in your road. You get so hacked that you pay no mind to the great big sign that says oversized load. You really think they can go as fast as you in your 87 Trans Am? They know you're in a terrible rush. They're going just as fast as they can.
Probably the biggest, most enduring song from this record.
Which is such a bizarre, as somebody who did not know this record at all until recently, I find that very curious. Can you explain this?
I think there's a couple of songs on this album where there's suddenly like an upbeat, catchy chorus riff or melody. And those are the ones that I think have really broken through in terms of the ones that people remember the most and that still get played at shows. You were doing that thing you do
The jaunty arm swing.
when we hear a kind of song that doesn't quite click for either of us, I think, where jaunty arm swinging. I like the song a lot, but it's always just been a little too bouncy for me. Like, I get why that sound is the one that sort of like people are into the most, but for me it just feels a little like not out of place compared to these other songs. It's just like, oh, suddenly we're like do 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 do, like, oh, we're having a good old time. But I don't know, even though it's never really been at the level for me that I think it is for a lot of Pedro fans, like I do think it's really fun. I think that chorus is so catchy. It's kind of like, there's actually like a full band doing stuff here, which isn't the case on all these songs. So I don't know. There was originally a slower, more stripped down version of the song that was released as a single, and that's the one that makes it onto The Only Reason I Feel Secure, that EP, which I kind of like a little more, not surprisingly. But we'll get into that on a future Patreon. Thematically, I like the theme a lot. It's about, teaching empathy and understanding. I do still think about it when I see big trucks sometimes. It's kind of about, cutting people some slack, not giving into sort of like toxic masculinity before that was a widely used term. Right. So yeah, I don't know. I like it. It's not as important to me as it is for some people, but I'm into it.
Yeah, I think there is a good takeaway from this. And I think it's interesting that you talk about a catchy chorus because it's like there's a lot of words in the chorus.
That's true.
There's real people in the big trucks that you flip off when they get in the road. You get so hacked that you pay no mind to the great big sign that says oversized load.
Low.
A7 Trans Am.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's
such a terrible rush.
It's definitely bouncier in a way that makes it single worthy. So
sure.
Yeah. People are probably gonna be mad at us for this take.
I don't know. It's fine. Like I don't know. I'm not an OG Pedro fan, and maybe it's blasphemy for me to not herald big trucks as an amazing feat in songwriting, but
How dare you?
What?
I'm just kidding.
It's fine. It's fine. There are other songs on this record that I like more, such as
Yes. Love it.
Old friend, your horse is ready to ride when morning comes. From this church town where damning rumors drip from holy tongues. It won't go away.
my number
Okay.
2.
Yeah. It's not in my top 3, but as I'm listening to it, I'm like, it probably should be.
Wow. This has got like I could see this being transposed into like a cowpunk song
Absolutely.
because it has that country flair to it.
Yes. It's like what we were talking about before. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love everything about the song, the sort of Christian hypocrisy.
Yep.
And fever to find the scapegoat fast and fix the blame. I know you never meant to leave the way you came, which I think is a super interesting line that I've tried to think about. Like, so it makes me think like, okay, so this person came to this church, presumably maybe hurting, maybe in a bad way, maybe needing support. And now they're leaving also probably hurt or in pain or in a bad way. And that the church didn't help, and that there's obviously something to do with rumors and people talking shit. And
that's interesting. I don't think that's like couldn't be the case along with how I've always interpreted it, which is like, again, this kind of Old West theme, kind of a Western town. We got that country-ish twangy playing in melody, as you said.
Even
and
on
so
a
I
horse.
kind of imagined this guy, suspect fled the scene. He's coming into town after having done something that he needed to ride off into a new town for. And so I guess I always took the sort of like leave the way you came, meaning he fled into this town to escape some trouble, and now he's got to flee again. But yeah, there's no reason why that couldn't be synonymous with what you were saying. I think that the core of it, whatever this guy did, whether he's actually committed some sort of wrong and has to escape to a new place, or whether he's just going through something and is looking for someone to help him out, it's like the fundamental story is like hypocrisy in this church town. Christians looking down on people, looking to blame, looking to judge. It has a real like parable quality to it.
Yeah, like in my mind, like I guess I'm not thinking about it in like some sort of like literal a suspect fleeing a scene and committing a crime. I'm thinking about it just like as that is an example of sin. And there's a person coming to the church who is a sinner, quote unquote, and there's probably some version of this sin that whatever the sin is not acceptable in the church, and they're probably talking about whatever it is this person, maybe this person's gay, and so they're like talking about this person, or maybe they had premarital sex, or they cheated on their spouse or whatever. And so the rumors are like, hey, I came here to maybe find a church community, and now I'm like, well, fuck, I guess I left another church for the same reason, and now I'm like have to leave this church too because you guys are being assholes.
Right. Yeah. Regardless of the details, whether it's like a true sort of murdery ballad type thing, or just
works
like
both ways for me.
Yeah, because again, he's using story as a metaphor to talk about how we live out our faith and what our relationship to God is. And if what you take away from a quote unquote church town is people finding you to be the scapegoat, starting rumors about you, and then shooting to kill you, whether that means literally or metaphorically, like that's a powerful condemnation of sort of how we behave as sort of church going people, and of people representing God and failing to do so.
Yeah. And the scapegoat thing, that's a powerful thing to get behind somebody to hate as a group. Right.
Yeah, I might have messed up here. I'm reserving the right now. I'm calling it to say I might move this into my top 3. We'll see. We'll keep going.
Yeah. All right. Bad Diary Days. Bad Diary Days, one of
Good diary song.
first of many songs about infidelity or cheating and
Yes.
A relationship falling apart.
Indeed. Yeah, one of the first Pedro songs I ever heard.
Wow.
I remember distinctly this being one of the MP3s I downloaded and just being like,
Man, you are really digging yourself a hole here.
sorry, everybody. This is it's 2001. It was a different time. Was it? I don't know.
You wouldn't download a car, would you?
Would totally download a car.
I mean, we can now just 3D print a car.
All right. Yeah, might as well. Yeah, I remember hearing this and being like, oh, this is some heavy shit. Like, this is my window into like these relationship deterioration songs are bummers, and there's so many of them. But I love it. I this is another pretty well-known one from this record, I think. And it's simple, but it's got a catchy central hook like that. I think is pretty memorable.
Yeah.
And then there's this like, maybe we even need to hear it. There's kind of a build up in the outro to finally some distortion and some cymbal writing. There's like a that finally comes in a little bit, which is satisfying.
It would not happen again. And she swore that she
Feels so
explain.
Intimate here.
We
Quiet.
both knew her words were in vain.
Hit me. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, that fuzzy guitar is great.
Mm-hmm. By the ending, there's even like some kind of pedal where it's like into that. Yeah, I like it a lot. It's a bummer. Infidelity.
I think you could probably you could say that after every Pedro song. I like it a lot. Yeah. It's a bummer.
Right. And again, is it like, is it just straight up a tale of adultery and a crumbling relationship, or is there some sort of metaphor here about infidelity to God? I don't know. I'm of the opinion that with this one, it's more just kind of just straight up a little fictional tale, but yeah. I know people have interpreted some of all of these as being like metaphors. So anyway,
like, I don't know. Sometimes
a song is just a song.
Yeah. A pair of ticket stubs in her desk, a movie I've never seen. So like the ticket stub,
that's actually the Book of Acts.
And the movie is God watching you sin. And right. Yeah. And girls' night out. We all know what that means. Anyway.
Yeah. Good song.
Good song. The Longest Winter.
See, I'm already depressed and sleepy. In a beautiful way.
Yes.
Spring comes slowly to this old frame. Still I'm frozen. I still live alone. In time, memories fade, senses numb. One forgets how it feels to have loved completely.
This song is such a fucking bummer.
It sure is.
It makes me emotional and sad every time I hear it. The lines, love well, young man, while you still can. Once your leaves turn, you won't love again.
Oof. Tough one.
One forgets how it feels to have loved completely. Oh God.
Yeah, I don't know if this is him imagining himself in the future, projecting it, or just maybe somebody he encountered and doing a version of that, or just completely made up characters. But having this perspective of an older man encouraging a younger man to sort of seek out relationships and love well in his younger age while he can, versus this old man who's depressed and alone is tough.
Yeah. Well, you spend your whole life in a studio apartment with a cat for a wife. Same, bro.
Sick burn on this guy too.
I know, right? Well,
yeah, but
me and Kevin, just
your wife, Kevin,
my wife, Kevin. She's a good girl.
Yeah, even like the song title, The Longest Winter. It's just like, oh man, these are tough. Having
Especially
said that,
up here in Minnesota, you're like, I know that feel.
Yeah, man, just alone with your cat. This winter never ends. Jesus,
yeah, I know. It's like, I'm like, here I am, a divorced man in Minnesota in the winter with my cat, and I'm just like, fucking Dave, you don't have to attack me this hard.
You didn't have to go this hard at me, bro.
What the hell, dude?
Yeah. Which is what makes me think like he probably feels himself saying some of that too.
Yeah.
So anyway, but real nice guitar tone.
Yeah.
That acoustic and that electric again, just like so warm. They work together so nicely. Feels so intimate.
It's so intimate. It's all so pulled back and restrained. I like the little panning that that's he's got going on in the different ears with the different guitars and the really soft drums, and it's great.
Yeah, it's really a pretty melody, even if it's very slow and dark. But I think it's a pretty song.
It is. When they really get to know you, they will run.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. What makes you think that it won't grow back in a day or two? Husbands in winter, they know the truth, but what can they do? I don't like girls the way they are, so shave their legs and make them look like movie stars. Then we can pretend it's natural. Put on whatever makes you attractive. If it's not you, then do it for the sake of fashion. If friends like a certain you, that's who you got to be.
Some pretty dope social commentary.
Indeed, which is part of why it's my number 2.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is definitely another of the big enduring ones from this album. This is one that still gets played. It's gotten played for a long time. But yeah, I appreciate the message a lot. And this is another one that, you know, as a whatever I was, 18, 19-year-old, like, oh, this is dealing with some stuff that you don't hear that often in sort of the indie music world. You know, this idea of changing your appearance, conforming to gender norms in order to fit in or like fulfill narrow social expectations. So again, he's doing that through the POV of a guy who's professing the need for women to do that. So the sort of sarcasm of that always hit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's maybe like the hardest rocking of any of these songs in a way.
Sure.
Like, not that it rocks especially hard, but that it's like full electric drums the whole time. And I just think, again, that chorus and that central slidey hook are so catchy. The like ding, 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 very memorable. And maybe the way that Big Trucks is too, which is maybe why those two are sort of the bigger ones. But I don't know, that it doesn't feel like bouncy in the way that Big Trucks does for me. It just feels very like it's hooky, but it's memorable in a way that I like doesn't make me feel like swinging my arms. So
yeah. The phrase "junior high legs" is a bummer. I was wondering if he was just like referencing when girls start like waxing or shaving.
Yes,
their
that's how I've always taken
legs,
it.
or
Yeah.
if he's saying like women who like they want to wax like so their legs are like pre-puberty,
yeah,
but they're
maybe.
like they're all smooth because they haven't started growing body hair or whatever.
Right. Yeah, could be.
I don't know. But
Either way, it's cool.
Either way, John loves junior high legs.
Oh boy. No, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. I do like winter legs give me heart attacks, and and husbands in winter, they know the truth, which I think is funny for anybody who's in relationships or has a partner who just like opts to be like, I'm not gonna shave my legs if I'm like wearing pants all winter, there's no point or whatever.
Yeah, I remember at a certain point he started singing "Husbands in Winter, We Know the Truth," which Jenny and I was like, oh, that's cute that he's doing that because he's married obviously, and then he switched it back to "They Know the Truth" after he got divorced. It's just sad. Anyway, good song.
Good song. Of Minor Prophets and Their Prostitute Wives.
All the time you were burning my letters, you were only acting the part. You think without me you'll get on much better, but you don't even know your own heart. Come home, darling, come home quickly. Come home, darling, all is forgiven, so come home quickly.
It's my number 3.
Ooh, okay.
This is the one that I am like, do I swap this for Suspect? They're very close to me, but I think hearing this again, I'm going to stick with Suspect probably being my number 4.
Okay.
I just love the hook, the central melody of this so much. And like we said, maybe this doesn't exactly transpose to a cowpunk song in the way that Suspect Flipping does, but like it's got that like, it feels very like Western sort of rhythm. That kind of country-ish riff to me. I really like the sort of pace of that. Drums are really cool here. I like the sort of syncopation of how he's playing. I just like the sound a lot. I think it's a really cool sound. This was another one of the first Pedro songs that I heard alongside Bad Diary Days and some of these other ones. So I think it was partly because I saw that title and I was like, ooh, I got to know more about that one. That's like, that's provocative. But I'm wondering, part of what makes me question whether I should swap it out is what you thought about these lyrics. I mean, it's about, on its face, the minor prophet of the Hebrew Bible, Hosea, who God told to marry Gomer, who was a sex worker. And she was unfaithful to Hosea, but would return to him, which is like, serving as a metaphor for God's relationship to humanity. So I feel like the lyrics work as either the perspective of Hosea, like a person who's been cheated on, or God, basically saying like, so Hosea is saying like the town will come after you for your sins unless you come back to me and I can save you from that. But that could also be God being like, you'll be damned, but I can save you from that if you want. It could be like a comforting idea, but it also could be like very like vindictive and manipulative. And he says, you don't even know your own heart. That feels very like gaslighty. And I don't know. I can't tell if we're supposed to find what he's saying like gross, or if it is supposed to be like a metaphor for God, like that we're supposed to find comfort in that and being like, look, God knows us better than we know ourselves. We keep messing up, but we'll come back to him and he really knows what's best for us. But I'm like, holding like the town coming after you / hell over this person unless you come back to me feels very like not a loving relationship. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to be anyone in this metaphor.
No.
Like whether it's Hosea or whether it's God, it sounds like an abusive relationship.
Yeah, right.
Being
which
like,
maybe that's the point. I don't know. It could be.
I treated you as if you were a princess. You treated me,
like a cop. It is a good line, though.
It's a great line. But I gave you boundaries to save you from certain death. It's like,
bummer.
You're not appreciating what I'm doing for you.
Yeah, I gave you these boundaries for a reason, baby.
Yeah.
Which again is like God saying, I gave you boundaries. I don't know. I wrestle with it a little bit. I'm also like, I could see it as being sort of a criticism of seeing God in that way. Maybe. I don't know. But maybe that's generous.
But you're still playing for love you'll never find outside of these arms of mine.
It doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't.
So
let's play that out in real life. If you're dating somebody and they're like, if you leave me, you're never gonna find someone as good as me. It's like,
right.
Fucking see ya.
Right.
Like that, is that a relationship you want to be in? Absolutely not.
And I guess I give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt because that connected with how he talks about God and his understanding of God in later albums, and some of the struggles he has even on these early albums makes me think like, hey, if this is what it means to have a relationship with God, like I'm not into that. Right. So it could be that. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because I don't think he's necessarily holding to this theology that like that's some sort of like Stockholm syndrome situation or gaslighting. Right. Like, that's none of it is great.
Yeah, but it's a good song.
Good song though. Good song. The Bells.
Hunger drives me, it's got me by the reins. I let it wreck me time and time again. Decided to never ride again. I don't know what happened. Dad, I broke my promise to you. If you're wondering where I've been, I thought I knew what I was doing, but I was wrong again. I understand, son. I understand, son.
Prodigal son sort of situation, or
I think so. I feel like it's another one that works as either a son confessing to a father and the father forgiving him, or someone confessing to sin to God and God forgiving them. I don't know. I like it. Again, like I really like the warm tone.
Yeah.
The guitar parts. It's
Sort of
pretty
phasey
and
kind of
yeah. Shimmery a little bit. Another like very slow one, but it kind of feels like a warm bath to me. Yeah. So I don't have a ton to say, but I like it.
Yeah, it's I mean, I guess this is the maybe one of the closer songs we could get to maybe talking about lust. But
sure,
the fair gender, they always turn my
agenda.
head.
Right,
From sheer
right.
embarrassment, I'm nearly dead.
That's interesting because that's true, but I guess the fact that he says from sheer embarrassment like makes me feel more like, I guess I always took it to mean like he gets embarrassed about how he acted stupid in front of a girl or something, and that's like what he's wrestling with. But it might be like he's embarrassed of how lusty he gets. That's probably it. So yeah, you're right. It fits in that pretty well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
God's like, I get it, bro.
Bro. Bro, I'm the one who
some of these junior high legs.
Hey, you don't see these smooth ass legs, you know what I'm saying? Like, look, bro, I'm the one who created them over here.
Oh, I love how God's now one of our
God's from
Jersey
New
guys.
Jersey.
Hey,
keep your eyes up here, you know what I'm saying?
Hey, you better come back to me. I'm gonna send you to hell.
Hey, you better be confessing over here. Talking about the bells over here. All right. Secret.
Lots to say about this next one.
Me too. Secret of the Easy Yoke.
I could hear the church bells ringing. They pealed aloud your praise. The members' faces were smiling, with their hands outstretched to shake. It's true, they did not move me. My heart was hard and tired. Their perfect fire annoyed me. I could not find you anywhere. Could someone please tell me the story of sinners ransomed from the fall? I still have never seen you, and some days I don't love you at all.
This is my number 3.
Okay. I figured it was. There was a time in my life when this would have been my number 1 easily. This was like a really special one for me.
Yeah.
And at that point I felt like it really resonated almost like a worship song. Like I remember sort of raising my hands to it at shows because I felt like this is the most sort of honest worship song I can get with at the moment.
Yeah.
I felt very much with him on being on the same wavelength in terms of believing, but being frustrated with the confines of evangelical culture.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, it goes beyond that because I had this exact same struggle listening to this song. I can picture our Saturday night worship services at North Park, being in the balcony, listening to the worship songs, probably you doing your punk jumps on the stage with your bass.
Did my perfect fire annoy you?
There were, I was annoyed. I'm not saying specifically by you, but like,
sure.
I was frustrated and annoyed by people that would seem to have it figured out. Like they could feel something.
Right.
And I couldn't. Like they were experiencing something that I was trying to authentically also experience. And I was like, why can't, and so like I was simultaneously judging them for like what I felt like was performative, but I was also frustrated that if it was authentic, that they were doing something and were able to experience something I couldn't experience.
Right.
And so there was like this, and that was sort of, that tension was one of the reasons I ended up stopped going to those services, because it just was too emotionally challenging for me to wrestle with that in a crowd of people who were like actively worshiping and praising. And I was like, I can't be here. I was annoyed. I was frustrated. And, you know, so that part to me, and this, sometimes I don't love you at all, you know, I think is probably one of the more honest lines that I can imagine when it comes to people who are wrestling with their faith. It's like this is a returning theme, this sort of wanting a physical proof, wanting to have some sort of actual experience. And talking about people wearing, I'm assuming, WWJD bracelets.
Yes, I think so.
And having something on them to remember, because that some abstract concept of God was like, it's like, oh, right, Jesus. That's why I'm doing this, because there's nothing else here that I can latch onto.
I appreciated then, especially the articulation of that, of being like, if this bracelet is all that's like tethering you to your faith, I'm not sure that I want to have that same faith.
That line, but if all that's left is duty, I'm falling on my sword. So good.
At least then I would not serve an unseen, distant Lord.
It's so good. I wish I heard this.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. I think, as you said, I still have never seen you, and some days I don't love you at all, is quite an honest and bold claim for a band to make. That was at the time very much still in Christian bookstores, and that was moving to me then and still is now. But yeah, it's interesting because I feel the same way as you. I was always annoyed by what I found to be like over the top praise and worship posturing. And I never even thought really about like that what I was doing, what I felt was authentic worshiping up on stage and I was in the worship band, could come off equally sort of like annoying to people. That's interesting to consider. Because I too felt unmoved by the popular kind of praise and worship songs at the time that were popular at our worship night and at other, I was attending a mega church until very recently, and I was never not annoyed with the Perfect Fire. And so I've always, forever, however long that's been, that I've been attending mandatory chapel services in high school, I have found resonance in it's true they did not move me. My heart was hard and tired. Their perfect fire annoyed me. I could not find you anywhere. Like, I don't see God here in this performance, I think has always been something that articulated my feelings well. And, but the fact that he ends with, I still want to trust you.
That's what I was going to say. Like, even still, like in all that frustration, I was still really trying. And one of the reasons I was so annoyed, is because I was striving for an authentic experience. I wasn't like going to force it and be performative and be like, let me just raise my hands and see if like I can get something. Maybe like I can pretend, and like I don't want to fake an emotion or a feeling. I want to genuinely know. And but I was losing steam and I wanted to trust him, but like I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this.
Yep. I totally get it. I think, I found that powerful at the time. I still want to trust you, but I really think the ending, the repeated peace be still is really what made it most resonant for me, because to me, again, we're sort of back to, which feels very not in keeping with the possible God portrayed in of Minor Prophets, but this God to me feels again like he's laying this all out before Jesus, being like, I don't even know if you're real. I don't love you. Like, that's pretty honest. And that Jesus' response is peace, be still. Like, I still kind of get chills when I say that, because I'm like, after everything he said, Jesus' response is so, I find it so comforting and so powerful in its simplicity. It's from the Gospels. It's from when Jesus said that to the raging oceans and calm the storm. Like, it's a simple statement, but it's powerful in its simplicity. And I think the reason that it's not in my top 3 now is because when I heard this, it was just exactly what I needed to hear, that like there was a guy who was going through the same things, but still found that trust in the idea of like Jesus saying, peace, be still. I can understand feeling differently about it now. Right. You're not trying, your aspiration is not, I still want to trust you at this point. And I think for me, I'm sort of past the struggles of this and have sort of moved on from those spaces. So it doesn't hit me in the same way. But there was a time when this really, more than any song on the record, like articulated how I felt about faith and my relationship to God.
Yeah. I think this probably could have been a super powerful song for me at the time. I mean, it still is now, because I can have those sense memories, because I can imagine those those experiences,
spaces,
and just certain people who were singing or up on stage specifically feeling very emotionally triggered by their actions and the way, because I'm like, why? I'm like, it just always felt so gross to me. Worship, like this, like, I think arguments for corporate worship can be made for like, this is how faith traditions wanted worship to be, like to be faith communities together, worshiping God together. But then, like, I don't know, sort of like a cool person, like singing and being like the person with the spotlight on him, and I don't know. It just at some point, like, it just kept rubbing me the wrong way, and but the sort of like, peace be still is something that like I was a depressed and like anxious and emo kid, like, and probably with undiagnosed ADD, and you want me to have peace and be still, bro?
Yeah.
Not happening.
Right. No, that's, I appreciate you sharing all that. What you said reminded me of something much less profound, which was when I was going to my Christian junior high, I had in some Bible class the assignment to come up with like the kind of church we'd want to plan. And I was like, well, up front, you got to make space for the pit. And I remember presenting this to the class, and I was like, because that's what worship is going to be. We're all just going to be in the pit together. That's worship to me. So like, like, I guess I still feel that way a little bit. Is it like, is that how I worship? I don't know.
Man, I'm ready for that church, bro.
Church of the pit.
I just Father God, I just want to say tonight,
just want to get in that fucking pit.
In this place tonight, just want to windmill these fucking arms in the pit.
Oh man, Father God, I just hope you're ready to open up that fucking pit.
Father God, I just want to lift up this shoe that I found in the middle of the pit. Is this anybody's shoe?
Oh my God, so good. Let's go there.
I just want to lift up my brother from off the ground because he just got knocked down. Let's all help each other up.
Yeah, God, when he falls, we pick them up just like you pick us up after we sin, Father God.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Quickly, musically, this song, I feel like it builds in a really satisfying way.
Yeah.
It's long, and kind of epic, even if it still has like a modest scope, but the kind of big buildup that it does at the end, and then kind of back quieting down, I always found really emotional, especially as it's paired with that peace be still line. So
can we hear a little bit of this?
Yeah, let's do it. mean, those bass notes. So good.
Oh yeah, it's the slow build and the little minor distortion and the drums slowly picking up, and it does feel like it could be a fairly worshipful live moment.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I don't need to feel as embarrassed about that memory.
No, I don't think so. All
right.
The Well.
If you could really see then you would ask of me. She knew the well was far too deep for him to wet his lips, but something told her that he spoke of so much more than all of this.
Like that tremolo sound.
Yeah, it's very much the same. Samaritan woman at the well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Living water. That story. I feel like they're I don't know, maybe more so on the whole EP in this record. You find a lot more one-to-one scripture references.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to find much of that
after this.
After these albums.
Yeah.
You know, it's a simple song. But you know, this is one that's told. I appreciate hearing that story from her perspective, although it's like second person, but I appreciate it as a kind of simple, contained story. You know, it summarizes a much bigger story from a small piece of it, just this little interaction. And I always found that to be powerful. Again, like I appreciate that over like a sort of hitting you over the head song. It's just like this woman having the surprising encounter being like, could this be, you know, like I find that to be an effective way of succinctly explaining this like gospel story of real at the time sort of radical overcoming of divisions and welcoming of marginalized people and stuff like that. Yeah, and musically, you know, like a lot of these songs also pretty simple, but
yeah,
the warmth and the pace of it just kind of wash over me in a satisfying way. So I like it.
I guess, you know, for me, these kinds of biblical narrative songs, especially if it's like you're just sort of telling the story and there's no larger metaphor or connection, like you're talking about, like a connection to a marginalized group, that might be a different kind of song. But this is just like, just kind of the story, and
right.
I know, very simple song, but
yeah,
yeah, it's all right. Not really.
It's not a mind blower.
No, it's not a mind blower.
One more song.
Yeah, closing it out with Promise.
I'll take something to believe, something with long sleeves, 'cause it's unpredictable. Now Jesus said he'd fill my needs, but my heart still bleeds. He's just not physical. Now why can't I see? If I look up and the sky's not there, is there any reason that I should be scared when
Surrender,
promise is
surrender.
a promise I know?
Mommy's all right. Daddy's,
Daddy's all right. That's funny. I do like the song. I have always found the chorus, oh my gosh, the chorus very catchy. If I looked up and the sky's not there, like I feel like I still sing that to myself sometimes, but it's not one of my favorites on the album. It feels the most like the whole EP to me, which is like representative of a different sound and style than what Pedro would become. So I don't know, it just feels a little on the nose as that record does to me. I miss the sort of metaphor. And I get why it ends with this, because it sort of feels like the most different. So kind of where else are you going to put it? But I feel like The Well would have been the stronger closer, like closing it in a quiet, more contemplative spot rather than the like Jesus said. I don't know. It's just a little bit like, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I like that it's trying to still wrap his doubt
for
in
sure.
there, being like,
I just meant more musically, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I like that there's some palm muting going on in this,
it's a little
record.
A little harder rock in here
for once.
Right.
You know,
that's true.
The whole like, why can't I see? I understand that the whole like the vision thing, that's the whole concept of the song is vision, being able to see, and why can't I see? And I can't actually see him, and you know, and why can't I understand? Sort of, I don't know. I don't like I still wrestle with the like putting the blame on yourself.
Yeah.
Like, why can't I see? It's like, well,
right.
It's because it's a very difficult thing to ask of somebody to believe such a monumental thing without evidence, without that with no certainty. And so like, yeah, it's fair to you to be like, yeah, I'm not so sure about this.
Right. I think I did appreciate it for that reason, that it was like closing the album on like, hey, I don't know. Like, a promise is a promise, but sometimes I'm like, I find this tough, which like, I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting that his song, you know, you can track it, as we were saying, very clearly through the discography, where in like whole, it's like, yeah, I believe. And then in like, it's hard to find a friend. It's like, I don't know if I believe, but you know, I know God still has me. Like, there's always a closing sort of
promised,
like,
right?
There's a promise. And then by future albums, that final piece is gone. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know if I believe, and that's the end of it. There's no like sort of comforting final piece. That's It's Hard to Find a Friend.
Yeah.
I had so much fun going through that. I'm really glad that you enjoy it too. I knew that you would like his stuff, but I was a little nervous at one point if you'd be like, not really doing too much in these early stuff. I'm like, oh man, I love this record. So glad we both enjoy it. Let us know what you think about this album, about Pedro and Bazan in general, at Magnified Pod on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Follow and subscribe to the pod if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, all the places. And give us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll read it right on the pod, like this one from our buddy Finn McCooler, who says, hours and hours and hours and hours of fun. Easily the longest podcast I've ever listened to, and I enjoy every minute of it. I must admit, at first I wasn't sure I cared and considered skipping to the timestamp, which is very kind, but apparently not obvious enough for some folks leaving reviews here, where they start reviewing the album for the week. I'm glad I stuck around, though. The non-album portions are often my favorite, as Andrew, John, and the occasional guest discuss topics from theology and anti-racism to Starburst and weird beers. Patreon content is worth checking out, too, if you enjoy the main feed. MagPod for life.
Yes.
Hey, thanks, Finn. Our dude.
Man, finally, yeah, somebody who like reads the show notes and knows that there's a timestamp.
Yeah, we always put a timestamp in there, folks. If you want to skip the Batman for half an hour, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but second half is always the album.
Yeah, we're gonna start putting our Batman takes in the middle of the album reviews too.
Yeah, timestamp for the Batman midway through the album review. Anyway, let us know what you think by emailing us at magnifiedpod@gmail.com.
You can leave us a voicemail at 872-762-4763, 8727-MAGPOD.
You can support us at the patreon.com/magnifiedpod, where because of our little break, we've got quite a few new Patreon punks to welcome.
Ooh, snap.
Welcome to Missy Luke. Oh shit, I had the air horn pulled up. Welcome, Missy. There we go. David Assel. Or Assel, sorry if I screwed that up. Nathan Kibler. Nate Ernst. And Adam Kramer. And Adam, we should say,
yes, we should.
When this episode drops, you can listen to us guesting on Adam's pod called So I've Been Told, which you can find wherever you get your podcasts. Talking about our background and experience over there. So thank you, Adam, for that. And you can pick up some of that new season 4 merch coming soon.
Yes.
At magnifiedpod.storeenvy.com. Thanks to Small Step Records for sponsoring us.
Yes.
Go to smallsteprecords.com to learn more. And thanks to shadow producer Jason and designer Bruno at Unoriginal Vinyl for our artwork. Well, I think I hear the voice of the spirit begging us to shut the fuck up. But we'll be back to try to make you go astray next week when we'll discuss Pedro the Lion's Winners Never Quit. Swinging my arms around like all these trucks I'm seeing in the road.
Driving down the road in my Trans Am with my dad in the car.
Dad, why did you let that man push you around like that? You should be
pull over
down
and
to the
face.
ground.
That is
to the
proportional
ground for that.
to this minor infraction.
Don't do it. You always jump the gun, Andrew.
I always jump the gun. I don't know about the rest of the country, but in Minnesota, there are two types of drivers. The person that like is driving maybe exactly the speed limit or a little below, or they are practicing for the Indy 500. There is like no middle ground. And sometimes being on 94 or 35 or whatever around here, it makes you want to, teach people a lesson. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, I don't care if you got an oversized load over here.
There's real people in those fast cars, Andrew.
I know,
okay?
I know.
I know you get hacked off, but
I get super
so hacked.
I'll do my best to be less hacked.
For more shows like this one, visit rockcandyrecordings.com.